Once you're at product market fit, then what you want from me as an investor, as a founder, is you want someone who's seen other iconic companies play out, right? And what were the things those CEOs saw that gave them the confidence to invest aggressively in the business? So I would give you an example from last week, right? We had an Upwind board meeting, and a lot of good things were discussed. Of course, challenges were discussed. But I read the board deck 2 days before, and I texted Amiram. I said, hey, I actually think your plan, I think you could be even more aggressive on the plan.
Oh, I love it.
And the reason why I said that is not because I just want to be aggressive for the sake of being aggressive, but it's like we've seen what these iconic, like I saw what abnormal security looked like at the exact same junction, right? And I'm telling you, you're on an even stronger curve. And so I can bring that pattern recognition because you're operating in, Upwind. I'm operating, with a much less context, but across many businesses. Hey, you're in rarefied air. Now's the time to push the gas, right? So it's bringing that context to help the CEO make capital allocation decisions, understand the aggression.
Saam Amiram, thank you so much for doing this. So excited to have you guys on my podcast, talk about Israel, about investing, and so on. So thank you for your time.
Excited to be here. Likewise.
Amazing. So first of all, we're at the mecca of technology, obviously in San Francisco. Saam, thank you for hosting us at the Greylock offices. So maybe, would love to kind of run a little bit of kind of the history of this city and everything that we, came out of this, from the biggest technology companies in the world ever.
Yeah, exactly. So we're sitting actually on the top floor of the 140 New Montgomery building, which is the first place where the first transcontinental phone call got placed. So Winston Churchill dating back from this floor. So it's really like an icon for technology and innovation. But yeah, it's a good question. And maybe I'll connect it to Greylock's history because most people don't know Greylock's the oldest venture capital firm in the US to have started with multiple limited partners. We turn 60 years old next year. And the firm started on the East Coast and then moved to the West Coast about 20 years ago. And over that 6-year period has been a part of sort of the technology ecosystem, dating back to when the firm was very focused on semis and semi investing, then the early days of software, consumer internet, on-premise software, then cloud, and now obviously AI. And so, yeah, it's all in the Bay Area.
I mean, when you spend most of your time here in San Francisco, obviously running Upwind now, how's the everything coming together so far?
So it's great. I think we're witnessing a big uplift in tech as we see across all verticals. So things are coming back from 2021, 2022. It's great to be building. It's great to be building in West Coast, obviously East Coast too. But for us I think we made a very clear decision early on to spread engineering, which is not something common in Israel. Spread engineering across the globe. So we have engineers in San Francisco, we have engineers in Iceland, in UK, and in Tel Aviv. So we're developing 6 days a week and follow the sun. So that's really helpful and great to be here.
Yeah, we'd love to kind of pick up in there. Because a lot of founders now, when they grow, and you have about 140 people now in the company, it's a relatively young company too. So how do you look at, hiring, and kind of keeping a very high bar for engineering and so on in that perspective?
So I think this is the one thing that is overlooked on talent, on how to bring the right talent to the company. There's always this saying hey, to start a company, you need to bring the best people. Obviously no one wants to start a company and bring bad people. But there is a very big, world in this, how to hire these talent and how to bring the right people. So I think something we're keeping very consistent is the bar for talent. To get into our engineering team, it takes a lot. We're coming from previous company Spot, where we hired lots of junior people and created boot camps and trained people to join us. Now we're going more for people who have experience, but also strict policy on how they fit the culture of the company. So while we have 50% of the interview is on how good you are in writing code, the other 50%, and over 60% is how good you are fitting the culture of the company. So we really want 100% fit. And if there is 99% fit, we don't hire.
Yeah.
Just simply don't hire.
How many of them used to interview today? Kind of when you grow?
We just did statistics. We hire about one candidate per 100 interviews.
Wow.
So there's a lot of interviews process. And something that we're also putting lots of focus on is the 99 people we're not hiring could be bad like ambassadors for the company.
Yes.
So we're putting extreme focus on making them good ambassadors. Like even though like we couldn't like work with you this time, like how do we still like make sure that the Upwind brand is something that they appreciate and we run a very fair process. And I think it's something that companies should think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sam, we're working around the office, and it's so amazing to see some of the logos on the walls with Okta and Palo Alto and Airbnb and Facebook and Roblox and Figma, and this goes on and on. You guys made a pretty significant amount of investments in Israel as well. We'd love to kind of get into your brain of like, why Israel? What do you find in Israeli founders? Do you guys like?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Greylock, oldest venture capital from the US with multiple LPs. We're in our 17th fund. It's $1 billion vehicle. We typically invest out of $1 billion funds. And then we invest in consumer internet and enterprise software. And you rattled off some of the logos. On the consumer internet side, we did the early rounds of like Facebook, Airbnb, LinkedIn, Instagram, Roblox, Coinbase. And then on the enterprise side, we've had many large outcomes as well. Our largest outcome starting from seed is actually Palo Alto Networks, right? Where Greylock was fortunate to initiate the company with Nir and lead the first investment. I think the first check was $250,000. So it was started very small, and then obviously today is a $100 million plus company in security.
It's amazing.
Pretty good investment.
Yeah. And then we've done a lot. Like Workday also started offices. We did early rounds of Okta, ServiceNow, Dropbox, Figma, many others. Abnormal Security more recently. And, it's interesting. We were just in New York for our limited partner meeting, and we were looking at where are we investing outside the Bay Area. So for Greylock, Bay Area is number one. Our number two geography worldwide is Israel. So it's actually a more active region for us than New York, LA, Europe. And I think it speaks to the quality of founders and the quality of opportunities. And, we're Palo Alto, Cato, Upwind, Piro, many other companies in Israel. And we want to be the first partner to founders in Israel, right? And I think the three of us were fortunate to work together on your first round. And if we can intersect teams like Amiram and partner with them at the start, and not with the goal to build small companies, right? That's not our goal. And I don't think that's the ecosystem's goal, right? The goal is how do we build very, very large companies, and the next Palo Alto Networks or Workday is coming out of Israel. And our belief is there's going to be a large set.
The ecosystem has grown up, has matured.
Yes.
It's more, 10 years ago, it was really good to build a company and sell it for 200, 300, 400 million. It was great, right?
Front row news. Right? So.
Yeah. And now it's like, if company is being acquired for 200 million.
Like what happened?
What happened?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a testament of like the growth of obviously the ecosystem. And so you had, obviously you sold your first company, Spot, for almost $500 million, $400 million. You built a massive business there. You grew it really nicely within that. When you came to your second time around, obviously you had opportunities and options to pick. So when you got to go with Greylock and Saam, and what do you think there?
I think, Saam, I remember the first Zoom we did with Hashim. And sometimes you feel the chemistry. I don't know how to explain that, but you just feel the chemistry. It's like the first time we met.
Mm-hmm. That was in San Francisco.
Right? So it was easy to make the decision. First time we met, it was easy to make the decision. And to your to your point, Hashim spoke 99% of the meeting. Saam said 1% of the words if you take an AI to analyze the conversation. And I still felt like it was meaningful 1%.
Oh.
I want to work with this guy. Same thing working with other investors in the round was very quick chemistry. And so I think that's one. And second, we're talking always about starting the second company. And so 2 years into Upwind, I can tell you, second company is harder than the first one. Harder.
Why?
Not easier, harder. There's these easier stuff of knowing how to raise money and hire people, but because you're gonna continue to do mistakes, and you're gonna continue to face new markets and new buyers and new things and new challenges.
And expectations is part of it as well, because we expect a lot, obviously, from
but I think
your market.
I'll put that aside. Expectations are always high, but it's really dealing with the unknowns and thinking that how to handle it, but you really don't know. It's you need to keep the same mentality of I don't know. I need to learn. I need to learn every day. I need to get better, and I need to be coachable. Even though I already made something, I already did something. If you let this control the room, you're done. And I think that's why it's much harder, because I'm like making other mistakes than I did at Spot. And
you make new mistakes. So a lot of things you gotta learn, you gotta do. So when you assemble your round and you look at your seed round coming into your second company, like what did you look in your investors? Like what did you want them to bring to the table? Why did you just choose, besides the relationship that you had with Saam and trust, what did you look in the formulation of the round?
So first of all, you want people who are connected to the mission. So it was very easy. Like early on, we didn't know exactly how the product is going to look like, if you remember, but the mission was clear. And I remember the meeting with the Greylock partnership, and the product features were like, we're not going to discuss it. And you always kept it like, the mission is to build something in this area of security, and you really believe in that area of security. And it's like, that's one. It's like, because the mission should be like very important that everyone will align. And then second is, what do you really need from your investors? I think it's like, one is like the confident and quiet to operate. And second is introduction and door opening in front of customers. And I actually felt like these two things, like, working with you guys, the very first moment we met, it's like, I know I have the confidence, I have like a great brand names behind me, like helping me. And second is like just introductions, and the amount of introductions Greylock have done and you guys have done during even the fundraising process was remarkable.
Yeah, it's interesting, by the way, because as we had as we all know, we had a great Upwind board meeting last week and here in San Francisco, an amazing quarter. I want to take a moment over the weekend and just look at like, hey, the company's only 2 years old. It's like amazing what has happened last year. So I went back to the seed fundraise deck, and it's remarkable because in the seed deck, you have a slide where you show the market. And to your point, like you knew the pain, but there were questions on exactly what was the product, everything else. But there's a slide, and on one axis is sort of operational, focus on runtime, developer oriented versus not. And on the other axis is cloud versus not in terms of focus. And you have Upwind at the top right. And like that was, I think, the opportunity you guys saw coming from the Spot.io background, understanding how to build for DevOps, recognizing that the real value in cloud security is not just what happens before you get into production, but actually what happens in production at runtime. Mm-hmm. And like, it's remarkable because that clarity of thought was there from day one, even though like the products evolved a bunch, the teams evolved a bunch. And, similarly, like for us, it's just such an easy decision because you meet an iconic founder with that clarity of thought and that North Star. And a lot has changed last 2 years, yet the mission has stayed remarkably consistent.
Hey, no, it's funny you mentioned that. First of all, thank you for, it's always
kind of going back to that.
Remember, there is a new firm called Latio. It's like a security engineer.
Yeah.
Who is trying to help security people choose their tools, like, but in a different way than Gartner, because Gartner might be maybe like too big, too biased in certain areas. So it's like, hey, here's like the brutal facts about all the vendors. And then a few weeks ago, he said like, hey, if you really want to think about your marketing strategy, like in how to like look at your product. So like look at your product in like 3 like ways in cloud security platform, which is like everything related to code scanning, SCA. That's like first like big chunk. Second is like cloud CSPM and configuration and all of that. And then third is runtime and like these 3 things. And then I saw that and I went back to, if you remember, on the first like year of the company, I sent like a weekly update.
I remember very well.
Weekly update. I still had time.
Yes.
Weekly update. And then I went to week number 7. Okay. And that's exactly the slide we put together.
Exactly.
Code, CSPM, runtime.
Yeah.
And then you need to meet the buyer.
Yes.
And then you need to talk to the buyers. And then you need to like evolve the product and evolve the features. But like the North Star was
So when you analyze a company at seed, the way I look at it is like there's I don't know, we'd love to kind of hear your opinion, but there's 2 main subjects. There's one, obviously the team and can they execute, and this is the United Bats and the reference checks and also. And then the second part of it is the time and the market and so on. So how do you define what makes you go when you look at a company at seed?
Well, I actually really like the clarity with which you just spoke. And it's interesting. We all know lots of people in venture, lots of people we admire. And I talked to some people and they're like, hey, I write a 10-page memo to make a seed investment. Yeah. And it's like crazy because there's no clarity of thought. They're talking about features, these things. None of that is actually the decision. Right. There's only 2 things that matter, which is like who's the founder, the founding team, and then we call it the North Star. What's the quality of the North Star? And our biggest mistakes have been getting caught up on like, oh, we don't like this exact feature, this starting point, because the best founders iterate through that, right? And so, I'll connect it back to Upwind, right? Because it's such it was the easiest yes decision for us I can remember. And there it starts with the team, right? And beyond, we all love Amiram as a guy. Like, I think the experience of having built a business, right? Selling that business, growing that business to hundreds of millions in revenue, right? From scratch, nothing can match that experience, right? And you've had success before, you've learned a lot, you've tasted success, and now you want to go build something and, hopefully build for many decades, right? And build something that, like, tomorrow will be the logos on this TV screen. The other thing that really stood out to me was, I remember we were talking over Zoom at the time, and you were like, here are I forget the number, 15, 20 people are going to follow us.
Yes.
Right. And so it's amazing, like, to have gone, been in the trenches, building a company. It's not easy, right? You make a lot of mistakes, and like 20 people are ready to quit their jobs and follow you, sort of independent of what you're building. That's like a remarkable sign. And that is very unique, right? And I'd also say that's part of why the company's been able to move so fast, because there's that core team with trust and understanding of how to work together, right? But I think that piece really stood out. And then I think, and this is part of the challenge and the opportunity in cyber in specific is there's so many companies in cyber. I think there's like 2,000 venture-backed startups, right? And they're all doing like small things, right? I'm looking at sort of, posture management of this specific part of the stack, whatever. And I think Amiram, to his credit, from the beginning was, I'm not here to build like a point solution I can quickly get to 5, 10 million of ARR. Like, I want to go build a platform, and that's going to require, you raise the large, it's going to require a set of decisions and trade-offs. But like, that's what I want to go after. I'm not worried about competition. I want to go into the largest markets and really fight for something that's worth winning. That also really stood out, right? That's on the team side. And on the market side, look, like, depending on the stats you choose, while all of us live in a cloud world, we're still very early in cloud, right? And something like 20, 25% of workloads are cloud workloads today. That number is going to grow to 70% over the next decade. And then some percentage of that spend is on cyber. Right. And so we're in the early innings of cloud security. It's the single largest market in cyber. And this market's gone through evolutions, right? And I think I would argue from my lens, the easy work is done. People understand all of that's good. Now the hard work begins. And the hard work is all about like what's happening in runtime. And, others can talk about the runtime story, but actually building a product that gets deployed in runtime and can actually be used to detect and prevent, that requires not just deep security understanding, but deep developer understanding. And so, we often at Greylock talk about why does this founding team deserve to win? And I think, again, it all mapped together because his vision around, I'm going to build the next generation of cloud security. It's going to be runtime focused. And my team understands that, not just because we've learned a bunch about cyber, but critically, we can do the really hard thing, which is actually building software developers want to deploy and use. That's very unique. And so that combination of ingredients, when you see that, it's like, go as fast as you can. And I think, I don't remember the exact details, but I think we went from meeting you to like, and he had many choices, right? But trying to earn the right to invest.
It was days.
In days.
Okay, it was days.
And the best decisions are very easy. Like, one of my partners always says, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
I love it.
And I think it's just the best decisions are very similar. Yeah.
So if we continue this line of thought, so we talked about the team, we talked about the market and Tom. So along the life of a company, when you look at companies at the B or C or whatever the case may be, is that fair to argue that the other kind of component to that at that stage is the execution? So talking to customers, what have you done? They are clients, what the logos look like. Exactly. So these are, so a lot of times we talk to early founders on the early days of the company. So it's like, you're going to get judged. Let's assume the team is amazing. You need to find a really great town and a great market to be in, because you're going to be judged at the B, at the C round. It's like, so if it's a small market, you're always going to have to struggle and kind of challenge it. Is that fair to say? So the next big thing at the C or the B round will be, the execution and what.
Yeah. Before you answer, I'm just listening to the question. I'm like, do you realize it's an NBA champion? He's talking like all these.
Now it's the world's best VC. It's crazy how fast now. I was reminded as you were talking about a talk Patrick Collison gave, where he had a line and he said, it's easier to build a big company than a small company. And what he meant was, when you're working on something important and a big vision, you can attract better talent because better talent wants to work on bigger problems. You can attract more capital. And I think this is all true as the company progresses. So if you're starting a company today, you're raising a seed round and you're going after a small market, maybe you can raise your seed because the investor can rationalize, okay, I can come in at price X, company sells for $200 million, I can make a return. But now tomorrow you want to raise your B at a $500 million valuation.
You should be stuck with this.
Yeah, you have to show a path to $5 billion.
Exactly.
And if there's no path, it's irrelevant how good your momentum is, because you're in a market, the market's going to, and all of us know so many companies where they look like this and then they hit the saturation in the market because it's just too small, and then the business decelerates. So I'd say like really be thoughtful about the space you choose, because if you get that right, like so many other things become easy. Another analogy one of my partners uses is like building a big company or like building a skyscraper. Okay, so if you build a skyscraper, you build a shitty foundation, maybe you can still build a 2-story house, but it's going to fall apart. You want to build a skyscraper, you got to nail the foundation, right? But then once you nail the foundation, you have the right team, right market, then it's just velocity of execution. And the number one thing is speed, because time's not your friend. And when you execute better, it compounds for you, right? And so then the thing we look at is like, what have you gotten done?
So these 3 pillars are Canadian. So we as Israelis, we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that. So like we as Israelis, over the last year or so, we've been through so much, right? War, and obviously Israel is getting a lot of attention from political reasons and so on and so forth. What makes you think Israeli founders, like what makes you good at Israel and investors? Like what makes the Israeli founders good?
It's actually ties to what you just said, right? Which is there's no other subset of founders that I've seen that so consistently have extreme grit and resilience. I mean, I'll be on the Zoom calls, with founders that we partner with, and the founders in a bunker taking the Zoom call. And it's just unbelievable. And, you feel like as an investor, you feel, I don't know how to describe the feeling. Like you feel like you feel so lucky to be in business with people who are oriented this way, right? And
I have a story to share on that with Amiram. It was the first time around, we had the whole situation with Iran, and there's, I don't know, maybe 200 ballistic missiles from Iran towards Israel. And it was Saturday night, almost midnight. You're in Israel the first time around. And, I get a call at like midnight. And there's like, I'm watching the news. It's like 200 ballistic missiles on the way to Israel, air drones. And so Amiram calls me. Hey, Omri, what's up? It's like, hey, I'm just laying on the couch watching the news. You're about to go to the shelter. And I don't care about that. Can you call one of my customers? We should put your POC. And I was like, I was fortunate to work with this guy because he's just a cutthroat. We just got to go all the way through. There's no other way, and the mindset is like, there's no other way.
Exactly. The mindset is there's no other way. And I remember like every time I go to Israel and I go to companies' offices, like it sounds so simple, right? Everybody's in the office. There's an intensity. There's no distraction around other missions. There's one mission, right? And you, as I say these things, you're like, yes, I'm stating obvious things. So few companies and cultures actually operate that way and persist as they go from 5 people to 50 to 500. And that's why we love this ecosystem.
Yeah. So what goes through your mind when you situations like that happen? I remember your email in October, I think it was October 8th, to your employee, of saying basically, and the whole world is against us, and we have a whole war situation going on in Israel, but we got to continue to provide value to the world, and we need to execute. And our customers really obviously feel for us, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to deliver and have show results. And what you guys did in the first year of Upwind is remarkable. So what was going through your mind when everything happened?
Look, it's not something that you can plan for. Right. You can't plan a war. You can plan but what you can really do is it's like consistently use this resilience, and resilience can come at war. It can come at just losing a customer or losing a meeting or something like that. And my the North Star when this happened was and we're very consistent with that, is first we're going to support everyone who's in the front. We have many developers who've been called out. A developer just got injured a few days ago. And many developers, and there's tight connection between the amazing developers and how amazing also they are in their military service. So they're being called first.
Right.
And we were fortunate or unfortunate, but mostly fortunate that about 40% of our fully ramped developers were called into military service.
Wow.
Think about it.
Yes.
It's a huge obstacle, when you need to deliver on a roadmap. And we said we're going to support the people in the front. That's one. And second, we're going to control what's in our ability, which is stay together, help the families, help the people, stay connected. And third is the biggest win. And this is go beyond politics and beyond nonsense. The biggest thing is to build an amazing company, because this is what the world needs. And let's just focus on building an amazing company. Let's just focus on winning, because amazing Upwind is amazing. It's amazing economy for the US. It's amazing economy for Israel. That's the best thing. Thriving and succeeding, that's what's going to win everything in the world at the end of the day. So that's the North Star. And lastly, also I think it's my job, when all these ballistic missiles and everything, people are texting me, are we shutting down the office? Or like, let's tell everyone not to come to the office. Like, no, like, no, maybe there's people who need to stay with their families. They can stay with their families, but like there's other people who want to come and work together and be together in the office. We actually have a great like bunker in the office. So, so I think like we've been very consistent with that. That's the message. You know, we're like up and up, you know, praise in mentality in the company.
Only these really companies have bunker in their offices.
Yeah, exactly. And also just, I mean, look at that as leadership, of course. Right. And I mean, you know, we take it for granted because we work with him every day, but that's going back to the kind of people we want to be in business with. Like that's outstanding leadership.
Yeah. Thank you. So share a little bit of your experience. I mean, you raised spot, your seed round was what, like 300,000 and $1 million post, right? That was the seed round for spot at the time. So now you come in again and you look at the market, you look at CSPM and then obviously the evolution of CNAP and runtime security. So what did you examine when you looked at the market and where it's going to grow?
So I think like, first of all, we were fortunate to work with investors who have such a great access to like amazing executives around the world. And then we can go pitch and talk about a specific area and then see if that area is completely like, you know, solved. And, you know, I think like the world is moving so fast and software can change, like if software is eating the world in many ways. And you actually see that like, even though you read on the news that maybe the cyber security, you know, product is kind of like complete or like the problem is solved in specific area. You speak with the people and you see that there is like way more levers and more layers into the problem. And I think like we didn't really choose that market because it's a big market. I think we're a little bit fortunate. We went out of like our previous business, serving DevOps people, serving platform engineering, which I think like, you know, cloud, you know, acceleration and deployments, you know, it's an area to look at, platform engineering. And then we still like, there is one thing about platform engineering that no one is covering well, which is their interface with security. It's like, think about it. Security, people are finding a lot of problems. And then what do they do next? They call engineering and they call platform engineering. Like these are the people who fix stuff. Like security are the people who are responsible for finding things and managing the process. And it's very important. And then you have like other things to do. And we came from that side. And we saw that the problem is not solved, not from a platform engineering side and not from the security side. And then we saw like, obviously other companies growing really fast in this area. But the problem was big. And we realized like, okay, our thesis is right, but the table stakes to get in this market is very wide. And this is where we realized we need to like build horizontally and like create our, bring our foot in the door. And, you know, it's early innings. Like I really feel like the company is like 2 days old, literally. Like I feel like it was 2 days ago we signed a term sheet, and I remembered like, you know, a phone call, like, you know, when we like literally. So
I got to tell you a little bit about my experience. I mean, I'm fortunate. I've been in venture for almost just a little bit over 2 years, 2.5 years, and I was fortunate to invest at Upwind alongside you, Saam. And one of the things that I learned is that, you know, the tier ones, and I'd love to kind of get your opinion on that, and maybe to follow up a question on that, is that you see the tier ones are really challenging you on the vision and really building a big platform, and they have such a wide reach to obviously other companies that they backed in the past and entrepreneurs and so on. So they can really give you ideas along the life of the company, and they're becoming really valuable board members to your journey. So is that a fair assessment, you think, to work with the tier ones that are obviously investing in Israel? Because there's also an evolution of what's going on in our country, right? So there's, you know, Greylock is obviously investing in Israel and other great firms investing in Israel. So we'd love to kind of see why to pick, you know, what was going through your mind when you picked, you know, your investor and you picked Saam to work with you.
Saam, you remember, you know, we're always being like poached by investors to like raise the next round. And there is a very persistent investor who is calling me and calling Saam, like, you know, and I told you, like, he doesn't get it. Like, he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand like how big is the market. Like, we're not going to raise money from this. And again, I'm going back to like the number one thing is to be connected with the vision. If you're connected with the vision and like you like the team, so then nothing else matters, right? It's just like talk about like the right, you know, terms, price, but like nothing else matters. And I still see like, you know, many VCs are hung up on, you know, like, oh, this market is already saturated, or you can build another company in this area, or because they're just not in the details. So I think that's the number one thing, Jimmy. It's like, do you believe in the vision? Do you see the market like we see it? Do you believe in the team? Everything else, it's an execution.
So Sam, would love to kind of pick your brain, kind of going behind the scenes of Greylock. Let's say you guys do like something and you bring it to the investment committee. Like, so what's the process there? How many partners on the investment committee? What's the decision making? You guys make kind of take it over to the finish line?
Yeah. Greylock's gone through many evolutions. We have 10 investing partners at Greylock today. And we make decisions very collaboratively. And so typically our process is, some of us meet an entrepreneur, as happened in this case, right? We get excited, we build the case, and then we bring the founder in, right? And the founder presents to the whole partnership. And after the founder finishes presenting, we discuss as a group. We have a voting system, we vote on investments, but we're not like, it's not like, oh, you need a number of votes to sort of make an investment happen. Like our group has a lot of shared trust. And so the votes are more a way to understand like, hey, here's what different people think, questions that get raised. If I'm the sponsor of investment, I answer those questions, I collect the feedback. And then ultimately,
it's up to you as it is.
Yeah. And also I'm responsible, right? And you actually want that when you're designing the system, right? Because you want people to put their neck on the line for a company and for a founder, because it's an illustration of real belief. And so when that happens and we make the investment, we're very selective. So relative to other major firms, we make very few investments. So we invested in Upwind at the end of 2022. It was the only investment I made that calendar year.
Wow.
Right. And I probably personally met 500 companies and, something in that range.
Wow.
I like that model a lot. I mean, this is one thing.
But then it's like you go all in, right? And like we talk every day, right? We've invested multiple times in the company. You go all in. And also, and I think you want to build the relationship with the founder where you come from a place of deep support, but you can also push. And sort of my lens in our relationship is, founder CEOs always makes the decisions, but we're an input, right? And sometimes we disagree and we'll talk it out. And I'm gonna make a decision I agree with, I disagree with, that's okay. But it's like you want to really push each other in the spirit of making the company the best version of itself.
Of course.
I can tell a few things here. First of all, it sounds maybe like non-important thing to mention, but my experience going into a meeting with Greylock versus other VCs. So I was in a big room and 10, 16 people were on the meeting, and you have a camera that shows everyone, but everyone is connected with their own laptop and you see their face too. And it moves the needle.
Yes,
it moves the needle. So if someone asks a question, it's not like someone like a very small dot in the screen somewhere is asking a question you don't know who asked. It's very respectful for the founders who come pitch Greylock. And I think this is kind of making people ambassadors of Greylock.
Exactly.
Last night we met Ophir from Eon, and he was talking about Saam. Saam is the only person who gets it. The person who gets it, and
it goes a long way, and especially in Israel. It's such a small ecosystem. The Israelis are. I mean, one of the advantages that we have in our ecosystem is that literally everybody's one phone call away. It's such a small ecosystem.
It's a small ecosystem, and many people just don't honor it, don't acknowledge that in many ways. So I think that's one thing. And second thing is, to me, at Spot, there's these top tier 1 VCs, tier 2 VCs, right? I don't know who's running the list, but at Spot, I worked with tier 2 VCs, okay? And at Upwind, I'm working with tier 1. And I can tell you the difference between tier 2 and tier 1 is in the autonomy that the investors is giving the founder.
Interesting. So you feel like tier 2 investors sometimes trying to micromanage and force.
Yeah, even granting equity at the board level, right? It's tier 2, go into the details and really make it a very exhausting process. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be what you want as the CEO. But in the process, you burn so many bridges. And with tier 1 VCs, if you remember, I told you, hey, there's an equity coming up, we need to do something on the board. We didn't need to talk before the board. Let's not come to the board and we'll just.
So one thing that was really told.
That's tier 1. To me, that's tier 1. Tier 1 is just how you support the founding.
So one thing you told me earlier, I was fortunate to invest in my second company in Upwind, but you mentioned that the compounding effect of having a tier 1 on your cap table is very significant rather than, so the really bad ones are really bad ones in a lot of other aspects also. They're obviously bad, but there's a lot of other good firms also. But to working with the tier 1 fund and obviously with Saam and Greylock really compounds over time, and it really added a lot of value to the company.
Yeah. More customers than I can count I spoke with them and they told me like, wow, we took the call with you because we want to know why Greylock like invested $50 million in your company. Like, we want to know why, like, because they know Greylock is consistently like investing in great companies and they want to know why.
So it's as a message to the market. So it's very interesting. So you know, I came from basketball, obviously, you guys know, we talked a bit about it, but I guess also I took a very big step towards investing in venture capital, and such a part of the biggest challenge of my professional career, obviously, is you're shifting from an industry where I felt very comfortable knowing everything, played for the best coach of all time and some of the best players. So when I looked at venture, when I started, you know, I followed this pattern of that I saw over podcasts many times, is like this sourcing and picking and then adding value. And I was like, okay, so one thing obviously was fortunate to invest in Upwind early on and to learn a lot from what you guys do at Greylock and other great firms that was on the cap table. But I figured I can shift the paradigm a little bit, you know, because a lot of times when you know, one of the things that I was not struggling, but, you know, very fair argument, you know, to take a meeting with me even early on. I mean, you even introduced me to a company before. It was like, Omer, you cast people to basketball. What does he know about, you know, CSPM with data backup and so on, right? So, which was very fair argument. You know, I just took it with humility. We're like, I gotta change the paradigm and shift, you know, the narrative to become an investor. So I figured, I was like, okay, so let's say, you know, I can take, you know, the value add to put it as number one. That will be able to, you know, over time, I'm going to be able to source better deals and then, you know, per se, win access to the very best ones, because you know, quite frankly, the very best ones have other opportunities sometimes. So it really helped me as an investor. I know there's other firms that were like, we don't add any value. The best founders, you know, they do it on their own. But I was like, you know, the underlying premise was like, there's no freaking way I'm losing. So I got to figure something out and to, you know, potentially build a brand for myself and to our firm and so on. So when you look at yourself and your career, like Saam, so where do you like to put some of the, you know, the things that you like to do? And what do you think also maybe just to elaborate on, what do you think a great investor, what value does he bring to the table in that sense?
One of the interesting things, by the way, is like, and this is why I love venture, is there's people with very different strategies and different strategies can be successful, right? So, I mean, there's great firms that explicitly state they don't, you know, their job is not to add value, and they've been very successful in their firms where they're really focused on value. We are in the camp of like, we want to be the founder's most valuable or one of the most valuable advisors and partners. And so we think about it on a couple of dimensions, right? The first is actually the least tactical, but the most important, which is there has to be strong alignment on the mission. And the founder and CEO has to feel comfortable calling us with the bad news first, because they want that thought partnership and navigating through it, right? Every company we've been a part of, every company you see on that screen had a moment where it looked like the wheels were completely coming off, right? And we were there, and sort of our job is to like back the founder and make them feel even more conviction in themselves at those particular moments. So I think one is like, there has to be that partnership and alignment around the mission, number one. Then I would say the sort of value add evolves as the company progresses and we think about things through phases, right? So phase one, getting to product market fit. There's two things we do there. One is, you know, not just customer introductions, they're important, right? But the right customer introductions with the right understanding of how to parse what the customer is saying, right? Because if I introduce you to a CISO who I know really well, and that CISO gives you feedback X and you walk out really excited, but I've introduced the CISO to 10 other companies, and I then follow up with the CISO and he's like, no, like this was a good idea, but it's ranks number 5 of 10. That's very important feedback for the founder to hear, right? And so it's customer feedback, customer introductions to the right customers with the right kind of translation of what the customer is saying. And then recruiting, right? And recruiting is happening both on the engineering side and then also on the go-to-market side and go-to-market executive side, right? So that's kind of phase one, like get to product market fit. Once you're at product market fit, then what you want from me as an investor, as a founder, is you want someone who's seen other iconic companies play out, right? And what were the things those CEOs saw that gave them the confidence to invest aggressively in the business? So I would give you an example from last week, right? We had an Upwind board meeting, and you know, a lot of good things were discussed. Of course, challenges were discussed. But I read the board deck 2 days before, and I texted Amiram. I said, "Hey, I actually think your plan. I think you could be even more aggressive on the plan."
Oh, I love it.
And the reason why I said that is not because I just want to be aggressive for the sake of being aggressive, but it's like we've seen what these iconic. Like I saw what abnormal security looked like at the exact same junction, right? And I'm telling you, you're on an even stronger curve. And so I can bring that pattern recognition because you're operating in, you know, Upwind. I'm operating, you know, with a much less context, but across many businesses. Hey, you're in rarefied air. Now's the time to push the gas, right? So it's bringing that context to help the CEO make capital allocation decisions, understand the aggression, right? And then I think, look, team is everything. And as you go through these phases, what's required of every seat changes. And some people learn and they up level themselves as executives, right? I'm normal security. The person who joined us at 1 million of ARR is now still with us at hundreds of millions of ARR running revenue. But many people, they can't, and it's not like good or bad. It's just like, they can run the journey, but then their capability caps out. So the best founders are willing to make hard people decisions. And, we have to back them up and giving them the confidence to sort of make those calls, make those, sharing our perspective. And often we're wrong and it's the founder's call. But so, there's that piece as the company progresses. And then as the company gets further along, there's everything around sort of how do we help them go raise more capital, help them, think about M&A as a muscle, eventually think about sort of the public markets. There's that piece as well.
Absolutely. So we'd love to kind of, one of the things that, we took a little bit about offline is that, Israeli founders mostly, fail around, go-to-market execution and so on. So how do you define, first of all, how do you keep a broad network of go-to-market experts? I know you brought AF sales for Amiram and Upwind, which has been remarkable.
Yes.
How do you, when is the right time to engage with someone like that? Yes. As Amiram obviously has experience and he saw scale that, so maybe it can be a little bit earlier than other green teams coming out of the Israeli army, and now they got to execute in America, and it's their first time around. Like, when would be the right time for you, in your opinion, to bring like a head of sales or regional sales to a company?
And we're having a good debate, the three of us, about this question beforehand. And I think, look, I don't think there's a single answer, and there are examples of any sort of thing working. But I'll give you sort of my point of view, which is the moment, like, okay, you start the company, you have the right team, you have the right market. The next thing you need to do is you need to deliver superior product, and that product needs to get to product market fit. And I would define that as you can go into POVs and you can win, pick a number, 80% of those POVs. I mean, 90% would be even better, right? The moment you have that, I would say you have product market fit, right? Because you know how to deliver the product, you know how to get the customer to value, you know how to get them to buy. And by definition, if you're running POVs, often some of those POVs are competitive. So you have a superior product. When you have that, you're ready to build out your go-to-market team, starting with the head of sales and also head of marketing. Now, if you believe you have the leading indicators of that, and so perhaps you don't yet have the 10 wins you can point to, but you're like, hey, Saam, I'm in 5 accounts. They're running the product. I know it's working. We're just 2 months away from them actually purchasing. Then you can consider bringing the person in earlier. The risk is, in my mind, is you bring in a head of sales before the product is ready. And it's not that head of sales can't come and get you to some revenue, but they start pouring gas on a fire that's like not correctly designed, or whatever the analogy is, right? And then you get to, and it's actually the worst kind of success, because the business starts growing, it's $1 million, $3 million, $5 million of revenue, 10 million, 20 million. But it's all, it's all messed up under the hood. And actually you haven't built a thing that can scale to hundreds of millions in revenue. And now you learn that at 20 million of revenue, when you have 15 sales reps in the building, it's much harder to do that re-engineering work. Get that work done early. I'd rather you go slower so that when you hit the gas, you can go really fast. And so that's sort of how I think about timing.
That's great. Amiram, that was kind of the way you did it with Upwind as well?
Yeah, I think it's literally like the perfect answer to think about it. Because if you do it too soon, it can create friction. It can create it might create a culture of losing, because you bring like a revenue person. The revenue person, obviously you want to win. So I think it's one of the hardest things to get right. And that's why I think it's something that the investors, the board should continuously talk with the CEO. And I think the only thing I would add to this answer is every company needs to identify 2 things, regardless of and maybe the third thing is when, but when is very ambiguous. So I think beyond when is 2 things to identify that are super, I think, more tangible. One is what am I looking for to hire? What is the pattern? I'm looking right now for a VP level, or I'm looking for a BDR, or I'm looking just for someone to generate the demand, or an SE is going to help me to do these POVs. Really define what are you looking for? And then the second is, because every company might, one company can hire immediately a VP level, and one company might hire a BDR, and one company is just going to bring the first SE, a sales engineer. And then the second thing you need to define very well is the pattern of that person. If I'm bringing a VP, what type of VP do I want? Or I just call a recruiter is just going to show me 10 people, and then I'll just have to pick. And obviously, You're going to talk to good people and you're going to like him. And then all of a sudden you hire them and you're like, okay, what do I do now? I hired the wrong person, but he's a good guy, but he's the wrong person. So you need to really look for the right pattern. And I think to your point, like, and to your favor, like I would say is that like Saam helped me to like identify the pattern, like what type of person we need. And I think in our case, it was, we wanted someone, and maybe that's not true for all companies, but we wanted someone who can lead sales and hasn't reached his peak. Like someone who has done really well on sales, have seen greatness, but he's on his way up. Like what is like, for example, like someone who like took a company public or like took a company to 100 million really quickly. You don't want to bring him back to like a million because he's reached his peak. And like now he needs to reach another peak. And if you bring him back, it might not going to be the best thing for him. So I think like knowing these two things can help to solve, like to avoid a lot of mistakes.
So if you can simplify a little bit of your work coming up today on a day-to-day basis, so I'm sure you're very, very engaged and involved in the sales. It's product, just doesn't, where do you spend most of your time?
I think like my time is like really depends on the quarter of the year. So I'm finding myself like always either building a new engine in the company or fixing an engine in the company. And sometimes it will be like building sales. And right now moving to build customer success, and right now fix something in product, and now I'll go fix something in sales. So it's like kind of like where do I put my time? Right now, where we are, building sales with Max was awesome. And right now, I think like with first year, like really built engineering and build product. And we have amazing leaders in this area, Joshua, Tal, Nadav, like, they can just like run with that. And now it's like really like sales time and marketing and demand generation. And maybe in a few quarters that's going to change, but now like it's heavily sales and marketing.
Great. One of the things that, I brought this question on purpose, just because, we talked a little bit about offline before that is that we see a lot of the Israeli companies, or the companies overall, fail not necessarily particularly on technology kind of execution and go to market, and they don't need ICP and a fund or a sales fund and so on and so forth. So, I completely agree with you guys. It might not be, it's also on a case by case basis on like who you work with in the past, a relationship with them and so on. But it's a point of discussion that I think is worthwhile to discuss, especially internally in Israel. We started to see some sort of a notion of second-time founders bringing, kind of CRO out of sales earlier than the past. They also have the ability because there is a little bit more money. But this is kind of like my side note as an unpopular opinion. But I'd love to kind of follow up on them. So maybe what is your unpopular opinion on something that, that other people think that is kind of conventional?
I have many. I'm trying to think through which to pick. I think the biggest is like this go slow to go fast. I think too many companies focus on, I need to get to some revenue as quickly as possible. And then they start making odd decisions that yield local maxima outcomes, but not global maxima, right? So the classic one is like, I want to get to revenue very quickly. I go talk to a couple of customers. Here's one pretty thin thing I can go build in 3 months of engineering time. And, I can get some POCs going, right? And then also their investors might be egging them on because the investor wants to see revenue momentum. So he or she feels good about the investment gets marked up. This is not a way to build a big company, right? And again, like I'm not just trying to flatter Amiram, but I would connect it back to Upwind, right? Which is like when we started, really good problem statement, unclear on like knew the elements of the solution, work to go do on the solution, and also like pretty significant platform build out required to serve the customer and really solve the problem. And so, I mean, I forget exact numbers, but you guys were building for more than a year, right? And like many engineers, world's best engineers, and no focus on short-term revenue, right? And by the way, we invested again in the company with no revenue because we saw the quality of what was happening and the size, right? So I would much rather founders slow down, really think about what you're building. The goal is not to get to 10 or 20 million of ARR. The goal is to get to hundreds and eventually billion plus of ARR. So true. And if you don't see that path, just pause and iterate, because once you have inertia on the system and the system is growing, it's very hard to re-engineer. Rebuild the engine of the plane when it's mid-flight. It's almost impossible. And so, I think about some of our largest outcomes, Palo Alto, Okta, Rubrik, Abnormal, Cato networks in Israel. All of these companies started with really strong platform visions on day one, very thoughtful founders. and alignment in the whole team, including investors, that we're not here to build quickly, build something small, take your time and then build something very, very large.
So one of the things that we also see, maybe just to kind of, before we wrap it up, is that a lot of time people make comparisons between eras in basketball. You're like, oh, LeBron James today couldn't do this in the 90s and vice versa, right? And so a lot of things that we, in my short time adventure is that was just, kind of not even a trend. It's a real growth of and maturity of the market. There's a lot of second-time founders are now coming again to build something, right? And there's a distinction between, what they've done in the past as a second-time founder. Did you build hundreds of millions of dollars of ARR business or you not, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that when I look at a market, you're like, okay, so you examine a big market and then you see different teams are starting to, go after that. And then, most times we see some sort of a second time team going after a market. When you define, when you something at seed, those many times they come at a price, right? I'm raised, a little over, $20 million at seed and more higher valuation than the first time teams. How do you define which makes more sense for you from a valuation perspective and kind of the risk mitigated?
Yeah. And again, this is why I think life is all about incentive alignment. So if you're a founder, you need to think very carefully about what are the incentives of the investor. I'm investing on a $1 billion fund. Okay. Greylock has had top performance. So I want, our goal is to 10x that fund. So if you run the math, if I invest in a company at a $20 million valuation and sells for 200, it's irrelevant. It's a rounding error. It's a total waste of my time. By the way, for many founders, that's an amazing outcome, and they deserve investors who are aligned with that outcome. And the great thing about capitalism is there's investors who are aligned with that outcome. But for me, we want to build the next security, the next Palo Alto, the next CrowdStrike. So it's at some level, and I'm not here to optimize evaluation, right? Mm-hmm. Like the valuation at some level is irrelevant within some range. All I care about is quality. Because if this team has a bigger shot of building that company and I need to pay a higher price, it's irrelevant, because if and when we build a public company with many billions in revenue and market cap, everybody's going to do well. And anything short of that is candidly, it's a failure for us as investors. But that's a particular incentive. And so I think when we were talking to Amiram, and that's why we love backing, teams like this, because they're oriented, they want to build for the long term. Right.
And I think some of the things also is when you're second time founders, it's there's a lot of risk mitigated towards that, because you saw scale before. You built sales team, you 15, 20 people coming from day one. I think a $200, $300 million acquisition target is not going to be as exciting as it was for you for the first time around, right? So you were more mature to build something a lot bigger, and you most time targeting potentially much bigger outcome. I think that's a fair point. Thank you so much, guys, for the time. I'm fortunate to invest with you guys at Upwind. It's my second company that I did, and they threw me right into the water. So there's no time to prepare for this, but I'm really enjoyed the ride so far. And obviously we have a long way to go and continue to build. And thank you for your guidance and friendship.
Well, I have to tell one Omri story, which is so one of my partners uses this framing where he says, when you're raising capital, the capital is easy. What you're doing is you're selling a part of your cap table for some service and value back, right? And so then the question is, how much value does someone add relative to how much of the cap table they own? And so I was thinking back to the weekly updates Amiram used to send us. I remember Saturday mornings I'd wake up, 20-page update on what happened in the week. You scroll to the bottom and it's what have investors done for me? And your name was number one many weeks. And that's just the facts. We can pull them up, right? So I think, I'm really excited that we get to work on this together. I hope we get to work on many together. But I really believe whatever the analogy to basketball is, MVP, you really are the MVP for the cap tables you're a part of and just the impact you have. So
that's because I'm here. And I'm
no. And as you know, when I talk to founders, they ask who else should we bring in? You're one of the only names we suggest. There is a rep.
And you see here we have architected the whole seed round of Upwind with you and Stephen Curry and Greylock, and on that principle of the analogy and the similarity between being excellent as an athlete and then excellent at anything else. So you're living proof.
I think one of the things that Steph sent us from day one, if you remember the first video he sent us, that winning a championship for the first time is hard, but winning the second one is sometimes even harder. And you talked a little bit about it. So now we want to build a massive company and obviously generational company. So thank you for being together on this ride.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thanks.